Hi folks, Johnny Laser here. Today's guest is NYSA member Louis Markoya. This is a supplement to a two-part series on Salvador Dali created by Jim McManus for his Life is 3D series for the NYSA. You can refer to Season 3, Episode 9, which aired on April 3rd, 2021. You can find that on Vimeo, YouTube, and of course Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Louis is a phenomenal artist and he was a protege of Salvador Dali, so I'm sure you'll enjoy this interview. Please follow us and also subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels. So now, here is Louis Markoya.
For the Alice Cooper hologram, I was around for quite a bit of that, and that was quite a circus because Cooper was always drunk and Dali couldn't understand him because he was drunk, and Dali was always talking in half Italian and half French and a little bit of English thrown in, so neither of them could understand each other. So it was really quite a scene.
Wow. Now, when was this done?
That's like 73, I think, 72 or 73.
Why did he pick Alice Cooper?
Well, Dali is a media whore. So if Alice Cooper's in town and he has a lot of press, Dali will try to grab onto whatever he can. And Alice Cooper was getting a lot of press at the time with having had his stage show with the big snakes and all that stuff. So Dali said, I'll try to benefit from that.
And why a hologram?
So Dali wanted to do holograms because Dali was interested in trying to recreate the third dimension on a flat surface for art, for artistic purposes. So that his premise to that was that all the artists since the Renaissance, since perspective in art had been used, have been trying to recreate the third dimension on a flat surface. And because perspective only does what it does, and perspective and shadows and painting realistically only does what it does, Dali was trying every method that he can to make 3D more 3D, actual 3D. He wanted to have real three-dimensional stuff like full-color holograms now, or full-color lenticulars now, or whatever. That's what he was really looking for and never achieved. So he was trying stereoscopic stuff. He was introduced through computer drawings that were in early computer stereoscopic books for computer generation, and saw them with a viewer, started to want to incorporate them into his art, and then wanted to expand it to other stereoscopic photography.
How did he find the holographer?
The holographer actually just presented himself to him. Just like one day showed up and said, do you want to make holograms? And Dali said, yes, you're in. So let's start.
He was looking for a subject, and the rest is history.
Alice Cooper was one of probably a dozen holograms that were done at the time, but there were several flat holograms. Alice Cooper was one cylindrical hologram. There was another one done of his wife Gala later on, but that was done as sort of as the grand experiment. The other flat ones were conventional holograms, but they were all one color green light laser holograms, and they fell far from what Dali really wanted to do, because he wanted to make full color 3D pictures.
Who created the pose?
Well, that was a collaboration between Dali and the holographer on a turntable to see what they could fit within the scope of the laser. Oh, it went all freaking day. I don't know. It went all day.
Why did they settle on this one?
Well, this was sort of what was settled on, because there's stuff that you can't see in this particular, the picture's like too fuzzy. But Dali had made a little exploded statue that was a microphone that was supposed to resemble a microphone that Alice Cooper was holding. Alice Cooper had a wax brain that Dali had painted ants on it that was mounted to the back of his head in this. So it's actually a lot more surreal than it looks in this.
Were any regular stereo pictures taken, or any other photographs taken?
Well, there were photographs taken for sure, but I don't know where they ended up. I don't know that any stereo photographs were taken of this.
I recall you mentioning a bit about you finding the stereo realist camera, or you assignment to go out and get a camera.
Well, Dali had started his stereoscopic paintings, and he wanted me to help, and I didn't have a camera, and I didn't know about one, but I happened to find one in Klein's bookstore in Westport, Connecticut, a stereo realist, So I bought it and just started taking pictures. And Dolly wanted me to take pictures of pencils and paintbrushes and shoes and go down to the docks and take it between boats and take hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stereo pairs in black and white, which he would have his photographer blow up and see if he wanted to use or not in compositions.
So did you ever have any of those images mounted in to look in a viewer, or they were that wasn't the intention?
Well, the only way those images were mounted were on stereo cards that were in the old-fashioned handheld viewers, and the stereo pairs were mounted on the cards, replacing the photos that were on the cards, just taping them on the cards. That's how we ended up viewing them to see how the 3D worked and see if Dolly wanted to use it or not, or see how far we could get with the 3D. So all the experiments were done that way, actually taping little black and white photos that were done from the stereo realist onto stereo cards and then putting them in an actual antique type viewer.
Did the photographer run them through a enlarger or something? How did that work?
Yeah, I had to I handed over all the film, all the negatives to Dolly and his photographer. And if Dolly was going to use anything, he would discuss it with the photographer, not me, because then at that point it was out of my hands. They were discussing what they wanted to do with it.
Where is that film at this point? Do you have an idea?
Oh, forget it. I have no idea. Dolly gave it to the photographer, and what happened to it from there, I have no idea. I could, I have one box of like really weird stuff, and I could look to see if there's any of those negatives available in there. There might be.
How long did this take? Was it a full day, or was it several days of shooting?
Oh, well, when Dolly had me like take experiments, I was doing it, for weeks. I would bring in new stuff every few days. I'd shoot a roll of film of like pencils in a cup, or paintbrushes in a hand, or a shoe on the ground, or all kinds of things. I would just go home and shoot another roll and come back in a couple of days and give them the film from that, the negatives.
None of those ended up actually mounted in stereo realist masks to look at. They were just done the way you said.
Exactly. We would all we would do is have when I had the film developed, I had, I don't know what it was, 3x3s or something really small made that taped right in place on top of a standard stereo card in an antique viewer. And that's how we viewed them. We just, there was no question. We didn't think anything about it. We just did it.
Who figured that out? I mean, who ended up?
I did. It was just, to me, it was the simplest route. I had a stereo viewer. I had tape, and I had to develop the film. So I just had these little copies made and mounted them to the cards, and it worked.
That's a valid way of doing it, no question. The other holograms, are they on display anywhere? The other ones that he shot along the way?
Yeah, I think some of them are on display on the at the Salvador Dali Museum in Spain. A number of them were on display for a long time at the New York Hologram Museum. I don't know what happened with that, but you have a lot more contact with them than I do.
Does Alice Cooper have one of these? That's a dumb question, but
no, not that I know of. I know Alice Cooper has complained that he wanted the brain back because he said it's his brain. But as far as I know, the brain is missing, and Alice Cooper never got it.
Alice Cooper's brain went missing.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, let's run through a few of these others. I could come up with like 10 more questions after I listen to this, I'm sure. But that's excellent. That was a really great background on that.
Dali had found this Dutch painter, Gerard Douw, D-O-U, he had found that there was paintings that he had done that were similar. And what he eventually found is that there were stereo pairs done by this guy. So this guy used a camera obscura or whatever and actually did stereo views of a couple paintings, views like this. So this Gerard Douw, Dali got obsessed about it because he had already done it and Dali hadn't. So now Dali's like sort of crazed. He has me going out and looking in libraries for Gerard Douw books and whatnot to try to find reproductions, to try to find images that look the same but aren't quite the same because they're left and right eye perspective. So that got him on the track of wanting to do stereoscopic painting.
How long did you work with him before he got obsessed with stereo?
A couple of years. 3D is always sort of an obsession. I would was working with him with a plastic that had sort of a relief to it that was made in Connecticut from a company called Roland Development. And the Roland Development had made this plastic that had sort of a lens type image on it that has a 3D relief look. And they had hoped to make a killing by selling it to the government to make reflective stop signs or whatever for traffic. And it didn't work for that. So they started using it commercially for advertising and whatnot. And Dali got his hands on some of it. He actually made a lithograph with it. He had me experimenting, painting on it on both sides on semi-transparent versions to try to see how we could get the most relief on that. So that was the first experiments in 3D using this Roland Development plastic. And, it was, for 3D, it looked an inch deep or something like that. And on planes, of course, because you had a top plane and a back plane, and that was the end of it.
Getting to this image and searching out these paintings, where is that in like
So
the history?
Dali had some suspicion of this guy having stereoscopic images for years, but was slowly trying to put it together and trying to get the research done to find the left and right pairs, because they were separated. They're all over different places of the world and whatnot, and nobody had ever made this realization. So it came together slowly over a number of years. It started before I knew him, I would guess.
I'm just curious of the conversation that led to you getting a stereo camera. Was it go take stereo pictures, or did you just come?
No, he already had a photographer with a stereo camera that was doing work for him, but it wasn't enough and it wasn't fast enough. And the guy wasn't here in America at the time. The guy was in France, and he's saying, I need this stuff. Could you do this? And I was just there to do whatever I can. So I had no idea what a stereo camera is. I did very little photography at all, but in a just completely chance happening, found this camera at Klein's bookstore in Westport. So when I saw it, I knew it was a stereo camera. It had the two lenses, stereo realist. I did a little research. Yes, it's a stereo camera. I brought it to the camera store, had them check it out. They said, it's fine, it will work well. And I bought a roll of black and white film, threw it in it, and took a bunch of pictures and started. That was it.
None of them told you to put slide film in, or did you just decide to use it with film, with the regular film? Because you were using regular film, not the.
That's right. I was
reversal.
using regular film.
Was that because you didn't know to put slide film in? No one told you that, or you just decided to do it that way for expediency?
Because I already had the idea to mount the photos to the cards to view it easily. That was what made sense to me. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't know how to do it. I just did it.
That's a great, man. Put that on a T-shirt. I like it. Yeah. How old were you at that point?
I'm probably 21 or 22.
And how did you bump into Dali?
That's a really interesting thing. So I was interested in art as a child. Well, actually, in the 7th and 8th grade, I was interested in Ed Big Daddy Roth, the guy who designed crazy cars, really wild cars. And I wanted to become a car designer because of him, and started drawing cars and got interested in art from drawing cars. And I thought at that moment in time that I would end up in Detroit being an automobile designer. So I really look forward to getting high school and starting real art classes, because in middle school, you only had an art class once a week by somebody that wasn't an art teacher, that was just doing it for the fun of it for like a half an hour for the week. So I got to high school and was like thrilled to get into a real art class, and took my first real art class. And when I got there, the first semester was on art history. And I really wanted to learn perspective drawing, all the classical art stuff that would get me to be able to put pencil to paper. And that wasn't happening. So I don't really remember what I did, but the teacher found me disruptive, and the teacher locked me for most of the year in the clay room. And I didn't participate in the class much, and that was it. I didn't take art anymore and forgot about art altogether. I was in a lower middle class family I was expected to go just to the factory and work, no thought of college, nothing like that. And that's what I expected to do also. But when I graduated high school, I was in the first mall that opened in Connecticut, opened, I think, in 1968 or 69. And I was in a bookstore. Well, it was actually a Hallmark card store. And I had a Dali book, and I saw it and I went through it, and it just like blew my mind. I didn't even know that art could do that. I didn't know that people could express themselves that well. And of course, Dali being so photographic, really changed the world to me looking through that book. I couldn't afford it, but I wrote Dali down. I wrote down the name. And a year later, my parents moved to a better section of town where I had to walk by the library. And I went into the library and I found an autobiography by Dali. I read it. And then when I had read it, I was convinced that I had some reason that I had to be in touch with him. And I also, in reading it, knew that he came to New York every year and spent 3 or 4 months in the winter at the St. Regis. So I decided to start calling. And one Sunday, he answers the phone. And he says, come 6 o'clock Sunday night. So get on a train in Connecticut, and I get there. And because of train schedules or whatever, I got there like 6:15 or 6:20. And the front desk told me to go down to the cocktail lounge, which is now doesn't exist anymore. But I walk in, and Dali's sitting at the back of the room, and he has a big line of people on either side of him with waiting to for an audience. And they're the most influential, the richest, most famous, the most influential people around in town at the time. And I just sat at a table and watched it and decided that I really didn't know what I had to say to him at that point. He already had like hours worth of people that wanted to talk to him, and he wasn't going to get to them all. So I decided to go home. And on the train ride home, I decided in able to have a way to talk to him or something to talk about, I would teach myself to paint. So that's what I did from that time on to the next winter. I taught myself how to oil paint. And when the next winter came around that he would be at the St. Regis, I had probably 10 or so paintings that I had done in the style of him. I had learned like really, really beat my head against the wall to find out how to like learn to use some of his colors and use some of his skies and stuff like that, and brought the photographs of the paintings to him. And now I knew the routine. So when I called and he said, come tonight, 6 o'clock, I came and made sure I was there at 5:30. So when I got there, the desk said you could call him to see if he wants to come down, which I did. And he did come down. And I got to sit with him for like 20 minutes alone. And he critiqued every one of the paintings. Of course, every one that I did, he had done it better. And he had done it better many times. And he gave me all the examples. But when he finished, he folded up the pictures, the photographs, and into a little like deck of cards and said, we will do some collaboration, which really meant I was going to be his chief cook and the bottle washer for a year or so until I proved myself that I could actually do something for him. And I stuck with it and actually started, as I did more and more drawings and whatnot, I got more and more incredible assignments and met more incredible people.
Were you still living in Connecticut at that point?
Yeah, I was taking the train in probably 4 or 5 times a week.
Where was his studio?
In the St. Regis.
Like a room in the St. Regis? Do you remember what room?
No, I don't remember what room. There was actually a few and different ones that were used for different purposes, and some were really like trashed, paint everywhere.
What year would that be, you think?
I worked with him from 71 to 76.
Well, New York was really, that's an interesting time for New York too, to be.
Oh yeah, I mean, Andy Warhol was always there. I was there all the time. Andy Warhol tried to poach me from Dali at one point.
Why didn't you go?
Because I thought, well, having been around Warhol enough, I thought he was a dweeb, and I didn't really think he had any genius. I thought Dali was really the preeminent modern art genius. So I was working with that already, and I wasn't going to go to work with Warhol at the factory that he had full of drugs and transvestite, and I was like completely, like totally out of my mind, afraid of some of the transvestites.
And you were well served by that feeling.
Yeah, there was a lot of strange things going on at the factory, and I heard enough rumors and talked to enough people that I didn't want. Well, it really wouldn't have mattered if they weren't there, because I was already working with Dali, and that was, to me, there was nothing in the world that could be better, and it certainly wouldn't be Warhol, because I didn't even respect his art in the least at the time.
When did he stop working with stereo?
Well, he stopped, he continued on with it for a while, a few years after he did a few paintings after I left in 76. But the stereo was overall a huge disappointment because of the problem of convergence and getting people to understand what he was trying to do. Like I said, we had a huge amount of trouble getting hardware to display the stereo pairs because he was doing paintings that were large. They're anywhere from, let's say, 1.5 feet to 4 by 6 feet. We had some prints made. So we had to find front surface mirrors to do that. Almost impossible with large pieces like that. And in the end, as I said, I had contacted Edmund Scientific, who made for us acetate with aluminized acetate that were stretched over metal frames that became our front surface mirrors. And while they weren't perfectly flat because they were stretched and they have some stretch distortion and whatnot, that's what we used. And if you had everything set up perfectly, so we would have them set up in a W. You had the two front surface mirrors come up to a V, and the two paintings come out on the wings to that. So if you put your nose up to the V of the mirrors and you use them to split your vision, and you're only looking into the mirrors and the mirrors are reflecting the left and right eye perspective, it worked. But it worked like hokily, and to the public, they would bump the mirrors and ruin the alignment. They didn't know that they should be putting their nose up to the mirrors and trying to split their vision. The whole thing was a terrible mess. I told you, one of the first things that Dali had an idea to use is because I was digging up some stereo images from computer-generated periodicals, and you couldn't find any other stuff much. There wasn't a lot available, and of course there wasn't the internet. So I would go to the library and start looking through computer books, and actually I think Edmund Scientific led me to one little thing, some cards that had some molecules. Then I've looked up the companies that made them and started ordering everything I could find. And most of the stuff that was stereo at the time was molecules. So there was universities that were working on trying to do stereoscopic molecules. So Dali would take that, and what he wanted to do in this case is he felt he was inventing a new way to mix color by using different color in the left and right image, and having those images that are sort of floating over each other in the convergence mirrors. You weren't seeing the blue or the orange. You were seeing some weird combination of them, or a little bit of each of them at single times. So he was trying to be inventive of how color was made in the stereoscopy to make, again, something new.
Curious what kind of folks were attracted other than yourself. I could see what your history was. You had a great history. Oh my God, it's brilliant.
Well, you had a lot of different kinds of people. You had mathematicians. So there's Buckminster Fuller was around. You had Crick and Watson, the people that had found DNA. You had a lot of scientists, a lot of journalists, a lot of models, movie stars, rock stars, all those types of people. Dali was sort of the rock star of art for a while. And one of the real funny dynamics is that while Dali and Warhol were both like the kings of their craft, and Warhol was really the king of New York, and Dali, when he was visiting, assumed that he was, neither of them they feigned being friends, but they really didn't like each other. They didn't understand why either one of them was getting the attention that they did. And they had wars by trying to have the best entourage, which was really pretty.
And just that, to further that just a little bit. So when people showed up, what would they do? Chat with them, interfere with them, suggest ideas?
No, they would come, and there would be a lot of people would show up and think that they had ideas for Dali, and a lot of people would want to come to try to propose projects to try to make money off of Dali. And Dali wanted to make money more than anybody, and he wanted the attention more than anybody. So those meetings usually didn't go too well. I'll do one real quick one. We had a businessman wanted to make a puzzle that would integrate. Dali had made it. I have to go back. Dali had made a picture that he took Marilyn Monroe's face and cut it out and had his photographer, Robert Descharnes, put that in Mao's head, Marilyn Monroe's face on Mao's head. So he thought that this was combining the cultures. And he was like so proud of this. The image actually appeared on the cover of Vogue one year, at one issue, in a special issue. And Dali was like crazy proud of this. And one business, Dali was like always peddling that how much genius he was from this. And he had the pictures of Mao and Marilyn printed on the sides of beans, actual like little actual hard beans, and was telling people if you swallowed them, you were combining the cultures of China and America. He had a businessman come that wanted to do a project with him, and Dali said that I have a project, that it's a puzzle. And the guy says, that's great, that's fantastic. Let's do a puzzle. So Dali, this is Sunday night. It's raining like hell. It's late. And Dali says, go out and find a China teacup. There's no place for me to look up where I could. So I have to start like walking the streets of New York at 9 o'clock at night in the rain to see if I could find a China teacup. And I finally find a Chinese restaurant that I went on, and they had like a really crappy, but they had a Chinese teacup. So I get it and I bring it back to Dali, and Dali now has a check for $100 grand in his pocket from this guy, right? So Dali, the guy says, what's the puzzle going to be? So Dali takes the cup from me and he wraps it up into a linen napkin, and he swings it around his head, making as much a commotion as he can in the St. Regis, in the restaurant at the St. Regis, at the St. Cole Bar, or the King Cole Bar. And he smashes it on the table and says, here's your project. When you complete the puzzle, you have a cup you could use.
Hey, listen, that ties right into your pottery story. That's excellent. God, that was a great description. I was able to follow it in my mind's eye. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is funny, man. Oh man, that is funny. I can't imagine the look on the guy's face.
Oh, the guy, Dali already had the guy's check, so the guy was like completely flabbergasted. So it was quite a night.
Could you throw at least a tea bag in with that? It's great. Oh, that's excellent, man. That's a great story.
I had to take literally hundreds of pictures of like paintbrushes in perspective like this, and shoes and pencils and all kinds of stuff that we would use for studies to do something like this.
How did he paint those? Were they projections, or did he look in the viewer?
All right, so after the picture was composed, so this was several pictures, not one stereoscopic picture. He would have his photographer blow them up, and then we'd have to take pins and outline all the elements in the drawing or the painting with pinholes in the black and white photographs, and then put the photographs on top of canvases with pencil, draw in all the holes that define the subjects, and then take away the photograph and then outline the subjects by using the pinholes.
Who figured that process out?
Well, that's been around for 1,000,000 years. That's been around since the Renaissance.
Yeah, I get that, but how did that get applied to this?
Well, that was the only way. Well, he could guess at doing the stereo, but that was the only way for him to get it realistically, because we didn't have a projector at the time, or
that's the answer.
Didn't use a projector.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Wow. How long would something like that take? And how detailed did you have to be? How precise did you have to be?
Well, it depends. If it was doing a person, you were doing like every quarter inch up a pinhole and stuff. So it took a long time to do the pinholes, and now you had a million pinholes in a large black and white photograph. You'd have to put that aside and then look at it to see which little dots. Now you have just a white canvas with 1,000,000 charcoal or little lead dots on it. So now you had to go back and look at the canvas to see which ones to connect together. So it was a complicated and a pain in the ass process. Like this is a real cheap ass thrown together nothing one. And the ones like with him painting Gala with the mirrors, that took a lot of time, or anything like that. Yeah, like this a lot of time and effort was put in transferring the images. I was around for parts of this, but I most of this was done in Spain.
He would be here for the winter, right?
He would be here for 3 or 4 months in the winter and bring back all the studies and whatever stuff he would do. And then he'd go to Paris first and then Spain in the summer. And Spain was really where most of the work was being done. Like I said, he had a studio or several studios in the St. Regis where some of this stuff would get done, but something like this was done in Spain. Yeah, so this is more or less, that last picture is showing the actual setup that we had for our stereoscopy. So in the statue that's in the center, you see a V made of the mirrors, or that's what he's trying to show. And then those two stereoscopic images that are on angles would be meshed with the V of the mirror to merge it when you put your nose up to the V of the mirrors. So that's showing a person with their nose up to the mirrors, using the two mirrors set at an angle to converge the two stereoscopic paintings that are at right angles to the mirrors.
Did he ever sell any of these?
I don't know if he sold any of them. There are a couple that were made that are in lithographs, so those were actually sold, and they have a little fold out, a little plastic mirror inside the lithograph that you could try to put it together with, but good luck.
You have a better chance of putting the teacup together.
Yep, exactly. So he did some of these classical Dali stuff. So this is things taken from old Dali paintings that were just, the perspective was changed a little bit from an actual painting that he had done already. So these were done without photography. That chair might have been done with photography, but the back of her head, that was from an old painting, and it was just fudged. The other perspective was fudged.
Yeah, no pinholes here.
Right.
Just
right. And that would be the same for that, and for all these little sinks, whatnot. So that would definitely be done with photographs. This and the little squiggles, stereoscopic squiggles, that was taken from a computer book. And the molecular structures, those were taken, just poached from computer volumes.
And who would find those volumes?
Usually me. Just going to the library, going to the New York library, going to the library that I had in Connecticut and Fairfield, and looking through the computer generated stuff, and going to bookstores, going into the best bookstores I could find, Rizzoli's and whatnot on Fifth Avenue, and trying to find any computer generated imagery. And this was like real state of the art, getting a 3D molecule at the time. So there was a few of them printed, and those few that were printed, they were all poached.
And was this is also that pinhole approach, right? Or
yeah, this was done with pinholes, and those were a lot easier, not a lot easier than doing a face or something like that.
Once you found something that looked cool, what would you like it handed to him? And would he just put it in a stack and eventually look through it, and all of a sudden is that the process?
Well, so yeah, there was lots of this stuff. So we had hundreds of antique cards with these damn black and white pictures on them, and that was also the way we viewed these stereo stuff from the computer books. A few of them had little viewers that were built into the book, little card viewers, and it just separated your eyes and your nose, and you could look at the stereo image with that. But a lot of these, still, I did the exact same thing, cut them up and put them on stereo cards so we could view them. That was like just the real easiest way for us to do checks.
Now, would you check them and then hand it to him, or he would say, check these?
No, I had to make the cards. So when I made the cards, I would check them. Of course, I had to check them because I had to see if it was aligned in the first place, if the 3D worked. So I would have to check all of them, and then he would go through them and see what he liked, what he didn't like. And there was a stack of cards that he might use, and a stack of cards that he will use, and a stack of cards that are just in the trash.
And would those stacks be like set up when you got there one day, or did he kind of know what he was going to do?
No, they would be all over the place. He would pick a few. He would actually have a few in mind, and those would really be the preeminent ones that he would go back to, pick up, and give to his photographer to photograph that, because it was small on paper or whatever, and blow it up, put it on black and white paper, so you could then do the pinhole technique.
I'm going to need to pick up an art book to figure out, because I still don't have my head wrapped too much around how the pinholes work, but I don't want to belabor the point. But I have to study that a little more myself. I wasn't even aware of that. how that worked.
Well, it's an old classical method, and the other way that was classical was using camera lucida. There's a thing called a Lucy now that projects an image, but we didn't use that. Guys like Vermeer and Gerard Dow, the guy that he found, had the classical artist that had done the stereotypes, they would have used a camera lucida, which allows you to project an image onto a surface through mirrors and lenses, and then you would just draw it on there from that. It's quite amazing. That's how Vermeer did all his paintings, and a lot of people used it, and it really is sort of like a camera, but you had to paint everything.
What is the history of that? Do you know who actually began that process? Is that just lost to history?
No, it's not. I'm gonna make a recommendation to you. Find a film called Tim's Vermeer.
Tim is the name. Tim's Vermeer. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Tim as in Tim. Tim's Vermeer, and Tim is Tim. I'm forgetting his last name. I actually knew him through his computer company, but this is a guy that made a computer company and made money through the making computer graphics and whatnot. And he decided that one of his things that he really had to do was paint a Vermeer. And when he said he was going to paint a Vermeer, he really meant it. He went to Europe and found all the elements of an actual Vermeer painting and set up a room with the right lighting and all that stuff, and made a camera lucida himself. It goes through the entire process and shows how Vermeer worked and how he reproduced a Vermeer when he had never painted anything in his life. Yeah, it's an amazing film. Another funny side to that is Penn and Teller are the producers of that film.
Why does that not surprise me?
So Dali always had these very extended perspective crosses, and he figured that would be a great subject for stereoscopy because of the perspective, and that's how this ended up. And it's actually his wife's boyfriend that is the Christ in this.
Oh, how are we able to figure that one out?
Because he actually modeled for it, as far as I know. She was like dating, I think his name is Jeff Feinhold. He was actually the head. He was Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ Superstar. And she's probably 50 years his senior, but she was having an affair with him and like giving him dolly works to bang her or whatever. So it was a really wild time. I mean, crazy shit going on.
And it was great because Dali decided to crucify him. That's perfect. What happened after 76?
I got a girlfriend. I was getting laid, and I thot that was better than working with
enough.
Dali.
Got it. Had enough putting the pins in the.
I actually didn't have enough. But getting laid was pretty strong.
Yeah, that does
drug,
it. That changes a lot of people's attitudes in general. You know, it certainly.
Yeah. So.
But and then what after that? Because we knew the girlfriend was going to eventually wear.
Yeah. So I ended up later getting married, having a kid, and I was working in a gun factory while I was working with Dali. So I would be covered with grease from the gun factory going into the St. Regis all the time. And when my wife was pregnant, I thought it wasn't wise to work in a gun factory because I worked in the assembly area, which included the test, and shit happens. I didn't want to get killed because I was going to have a kid. So I looked for another job, and I ended up going into the semiconductor equipment industry, which ended up being for the lithography equipment, the equipment that is really sophisticated cameras that put the images that become the circuits on silicon that become the chips and your stuff. And I stayed in that for 40 years, and I have like 35, 38 patents in that field. So my creativity went to working on that. When I ended up working with Dali, I had things that I had started with Dali and didn't really want to work on. I knew how to make Dali images, but I wasn't going to, for the life of me, try to compete with Salvador Dali making the Dali type images. So I didn't know what I wanted to do for myself. That was my real problem. I didn't know what I wanted to paint. So I said, okay, I'm not going to paint. That's it. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And when personal computers came about in the 80s, I got interested in them. And as soon as they were good enough to try to make some art, I made some Dali-like art, and I did a lot of magazine covers and whatnot, and became like fairly well known as a computer artist, but also dropped that. I had always thought when I retired, I would go back and work on some of the things I had started with Dali. But in 2012 or 2011 online, I had found the advent of a three-dimensional fractals. And when I saw them, I thought I could apply that to anything. And I tried recreating classical paintings and different things with them, and I found that I could do it. And that inspired me to start again. At the same time, I was in Times Square, and I saw in a movie theater a marquee for Spider-Man that had Spider-Man hanging off the side of the building. That was it was actually a lenticular, and it was so good. I mean, it was really holographic. It was phenomenal. So I said, all right, so that is something I want to know about, because that would have been something that Dali would have gave us like left arm for. So I started painting again, and I started contacting companies in the United States about doing the lenticulars. And when I contacted the big companies here, they were all doing like covers for Disney DVDs and shit like that. And they wanted like 10, 15,000 just to start a project, just to try. Never mind, like, you get it right. So I said, well, I don't know. So I saw a little ad somewhere about a Chinese company, and I wrote to them, and I ended up finding two others, and I wrote to them, and two of the companies said, we'll try one for free. Just send us your art and we'll try it for free. So I started working with them and drawing arrows which way I wanted the contours to go. I had like drawings like full of millions of arrows. And after 8 years now, I got two companies that are just phenomenal for me. I mean, I barely have to tell them anything at all. So they know about perspective. They know about everything I want to do.
Was that before or after you met them? Did you teach them a little bit? How'd that work?
I had to go. I went through. I'd say in the end I went through 2 or 3. Well, until I was getting something that I was happy with, it was probably 4 years and a lot of tries, and probably 15 to 20 grand.
Yeah, okay, that's a learning curve. So they shipped them in. How does that all work? How they?
Yeah, I would send them images, and they would do the. I would separate everything out into layers in Photoshop as much as I could. But what I was really interested in is not. So where we started was the regular lenticulars, a regular 3D, where you had a flat image here and a flat image here and a flat image here, and it was 3D, but everything was flat. So I was interested in gaining contour, and I had seen some of their commercial stuff that had watches or perfume bottles, and they had actual contour to that. So having them understand that I wanted, when I had a landscape, that the landscape had to start at the front of the painting and go all the way to the back and all that stuff. It took a while to get everything set, and for them to know how to set up their software to do that. And like I said, like 3 or 4 years later, we were really starting to cook. And now the latest thing I've done is like really like completely remarkable. It has these two figures, and the two figures are covered with a texture that I had extruded on the bodies in 3D, and every single feature of that texture is there in 3D in the lenticular now. I mean, all of it. It's not just that the arm is coming forward or going or receding or anything. Every little bit of that texture is really there in 3D. It's really incredible now.
The piano has been drinking. The piano has been drinking. Not me. Not me. Not me. Not